Every story needs a villain. The story of the 47 Ronin has one. His name is Kozukenosuke. He has been the villain for 300 years. In the kabuki plays, he is cruel, corrupt, contemptible, the man who humiliated Asano Takumi no Kami, the man who received no punishment while Asano died, the man who hid in the storage shed, the man who would not take the blade when offered. He has been played as a villain for 300 years. The audiences have booed him for 300 years. The story requires him to be what he is, and he has been it, reliably, in every December since 1703. But there is another story, not the kabuki story, the other one, the one told in Kiracho, the town that bears his name, in what is now Aichi, where the people who actually lived under his governance did not think of him as a villain at all. Who he was, his name was Kirayoshi Hisa. He was born in 1641. He died in 1703. He was 62 years old at the time of the night of the 14th. He was the head of the Koke families, the hereditary specialists in court ceremony, the people who knew how everything was supposed to be done, and whose job it was to teach everyone else. He was not a military man. The Koke families had no armies. What they had was knowledge, the specific, hereditary, carefully maintained knowledge of how the shogunate's ceremonies were conducted. Which offering goes where? Which words are said in which order? How a lord of this rank is received? How a lord of that rank is addressed? This knowledge was not trivial. In a society organized around the correct performance of ritual, the person who knew the correct forms held a kind of power that did not require soldiers. He had served the shogunate faithfully for decades. He had risen to the position of Kokekimoiri, the senior elder of the high families, the highest position his hereditary role could reach. He had taught ceremony to dozens of lords who passed through Edo and needed to know what they were doing. He had been, by the standards of his world, excellent at his job. He was 60 years old when the incident in Matsuno Oroka happened. 2 years later, at 62, he was in a storage shed in his own compound while 47 armed men searched for him. The Kiracho story. In the territory that Kira governed, the domain of Kiracho in what is now Nishioshi, Aichi, the memory of Kirayoshi Hisa is not the memory of the kabuki villain. It is the memory of a man who built an irrigation canal, who improved the rice fields, who managed the domain with attention to the welfare of the people who lived in it. The canal he built, the Manriki Ido, is still there, still functioning, still directing water to the rice fields of the region. An infrastructure project completed in the late 17th century that has lasted more than 300 years because it was built correctly and maintained by the people who benefited from it. The people of Kiracho built a shrine to him, not after he died in the storage shed in Edo, long before, while he was alive. They built it because they wanted to, because he had been their lord and had, by their accounting, been a good one. Every December 14th, the anniversary of the night of the 47, the people of Kiracho hold their own ceremony, not the ceremony at Sengakuzi, where the 47 are honored, a ceremony for Kira, a ceremony that says, "This man was our lord. He was not the villain. He was the man who built the canal. He was the man who made the rice fields work." 300 years of competing ceremonies, Sengakuzi and Kiracho, the villain and the lord, same man. different stories. The problem of evidence. Here is what is honest about the Kiracho story. There is very little contemporary evidence for it. The canal is real. The shrine is real. The local tradition is real. But the documentary evidence, the records that would show, definitively, that Kirayoshi Hisa was the hands-on administrator of his domain, that he personally oversaw the irrigation project, that he was beloved by the people who lived under his governance, is thin. Thinner than the tradition suggests. The Koke families were based in Edo. They went to their domains rarely, if at all. Their domain income supported them, but their work was in the city, at the shogunate, teaching ceremony to lords who needed to know it. The image of Kira as an active, engaged local governor, present in his domain, overseeing public works, known personally to the people, is not well supported by what we know about how men like him actually lived. The local tradition of Kira as a good lord developed largely in the modern era, particularly in the 20th century, particularly after the Kiracho area was administratively organized around his memory. The tradition grew as the town grew, and as the town's identity became connected to the figure of its most famous lord. This does not make the tradition false, it makes it complicated, which is what history is. What the evidence does say, what the contemporary sources do say about Kirayoshi Hisa is this: he was good at his job, the job of teaching ceremony, the job of knowing the correct forms and transmitting them to the lords who needed to know them. He was, by multiple accounts, demanding in his expectations of what the teaching relationship required. Lords who came to him for instruction were expected to express their gratitude appropriately. The appropriate expression of gratitude in Edo was gifts, specific gifts, substantial gifts. This was not unusual. It was the economy of the court. But Kira was apparently more insistent about it than some others in similar positions. Whether he treated Asano Takumi no Kami worse than other lords is impossible to verify. The records of what passed between them in the months before the incident in Matsuno Oroka are not detailed enough to say with certainty what happened and why. The accounts that survive were written by people with interests in how the story was told. The accounts that survive say Kira was contemptuous, dismissive, deliberately humiliating. But the accounts that survive were written by people who had reasons to tell the story that way. What no surviving account disputes, Asano Takumi no Kami struck Kira Kozukenosuke in Matsuno Oroka. This happened. This is not in question. What remains in question is why. The judgment and what followed. The shogunate's judgment, Asano ordered to die the same day, Kira receiving no punishment, has been the source of controversy for 300 years. Some scholars have argued that the principle of kenkario seibai, both parties in a quarrel punished, should have applied. If it had applied, Kira would have received some form of punishment. The failure to apply it is what the retainers of Akko found unjust. It is the asymmetry at the heart of everything that followed. Why wasn't Kira punished? The most likely answer is political. Kira was a senior figure in the Koke families. He was connected to the shogunate at the highest level. Punishing him would have been complicated. Punishing Asano, a lord who had drawn a sword in Matsuno Oroka, in the castle, in front of witnesses, was straightforward. The law was clear. The application of the law to Kira was politically inconvenient, so Kira was not punished. He went home with his wounds, he recovered, he continued, and the retainers of Akko organized themselves for 2 years and 4 months and came through his gates in the night of the 14th. The months of waiting. Kira knew they were coming, or he suspected. The precautions he took, the additional guards, the reinforced gates, the careful management of his movements, were the precautions of a man who was not certain he was safe. He had also moved. His original mansion was in Honzio Matsuzakacho, but he had relocated the compound in 1702, moving to a new location that was harder to find and easier to defend. The relocation was noted by the watchers Oishi had placed in Edo. Okano Hidetake had tracked the new location, had learned the new compound's layout through his friendship inside Kira's household, had confirmed that the tea gathering on the 14th would be the occasion. Inside Kira's household during those months, the atmosphere was one of managed anxiety. The guards were there, the walls were reinforced. Every precaution that could be taken had been taken, and still, on the night of the 14th, it was not enough. Kira changed his clothes. He went to the storage shed. He tried not to be found. He was 62 years old. He had spent his life at the center of power. He had taught ceremony to dozens of lords. He had built his career on knowing the correct forms, and at the end of it, in the storage shed of his own compound, in the servant's clothing, he was found by a man with a torch, who recognized his face and called for Oishi. The choice he did not make. Oishi offered him the samurai's way, the honorable end, the choice that would have let him die as what his position said he was. He did not take it. Why not? 3 centuries of speculation have not produced a definitive answer. The most charitable reading. He was 62 years old. He was not a fighting man. He had spent his life in ceremony rather than combat, and the situation in the storage shed was not the situation in which the ceremonial ideal of samurai conduct becomes possible. The least charitable reading. He was afraid, and the fear was stronger than the ideal. Both readings are probably true. The most charitable and the least charitable are not mutually exclusive when you are 62 years old and alone in a storage shed, and the men who have come for you have already been through your guards. He did not take the blade. Oishi did what he had come to do. Kirayoshi Hisa died in the storage shed, in the servant's clothing, 62 years old. After, his grandson had been adopted by the Wasugi family, one of the great domain lords of the era. The grandson, Kirayoshi Chika, was in the mansion with Kira on the night of the 14th. He survived. He eventually became the lord of Yonezawa Han. He carried the Kira blood into the Wasugi lineage. Kira's family continued in this way through the daughter's line. His direct male line ended with him, but the blood went on, into families that are still alive in the 21st century. The compound in Honzio Matsuzakacho, the new compound where he had moved to be safer, was partially preserved. The area is now a small park in Sumidaku, Tokyo. There is a stone marker. There is a small exhibition. The place where he was found in the storage shed is marked. Not many people visit, not compared to Sengakuzi, where the incense burns continuously and thousands come every December. The park in Sumidaku receives visitors, but it is not a place of pilgrimage. It is a place of historical interest. The distinction matters. 300 years of being the villain. The kabuki play Kanade Honshu Shingura changed his name, Kono Morono, instead of Kirayoshi Hisa. The location was moved to a different era. The shogunate did not want the play to openly celebrate the defiance of its own judgment. But everyone knew who Kono Morono was. Everyone knew what he had done. The audiences booed him. For 300 years, booed the actor playing him, booed the character he played, booed the thing he represented, the injustice that sets the whole story in motion. This is what it means to be the villain of a story that is performed every December without interruption for 300 years. You are booed every December. You cannot defend yourself. You cannot correct the record. You are the thing the story needs you to be, and the story has been told so many times that the story is more real than anything that can be said about the person who gave the story its villain. Kirayoshi Hisa was a 62-year-old man who was good at his job, who may or may not have been a good lord to the people of his domain, who behaved in ways that drove another man to draw a sword in the most formal corridor in Japan, who survived that drawing and received no punishment for it, who spent 2 years knowing that armed men were looking for him, who changed into servant's clothes and hid in a storage shed and was found. The kabuki villain is not this man. The kabuki villain is simpler, cleaner, more useful for the story. The real man is more complicated, but the real man died in 1703. The kabuki villain has been dying every December since then. The kabuki villain will probably keep dying every December, because the story needs a villain, and the story at this point is larger than the man. The competing ceremonies. Every December 14th, at Sengakuji in Tokyo, thousands of people line up to burn incense at the graves of the 47. The ceremony honors the men who did what they believed justice required, the men who waited 2 years and 4 months and came through the gates in the night, the men who reported to their lord's grave in the early morning, the men who accepted the shogunate's judgment and fulfilled their duty as samurai. The tradition honors them. The incense burns. The graves are worn by 3 centuries of cold and smoke. In Kiracho and Aichi, a smaller ceremony. For Kira, for the man who built the canal, or didn't build it, but is remembered for it. For the lord who governed his domain, or didn't govern it well, but is remembered for having tried. For the man who was on the other side. The ceremony that says, there was another person in this story. He was not the kabuki villain. He was a man, a complicated man, a man who made choices that led to other choices that led to the night of the 14th and the storage shed and the servant's clothing. The ceremony at Kiracho is smaller. It is always smaller. The story needs the 47 more than it needs Kira. The story has always needed them more, but both ceremonies happen every December 14th, the same night, 300 years after the night of the 14th. The incense burns at both ends of the story, and somewhere between them is the truth, which is not simple, and which has not been found in 300 years of looking, and which may not be findable, which may be the nature of truth in stories that have been told as many times as this one has. The villain, the lord, the man in the storage shed, all of them are Kirayoshi Hisa, all of them are 300 years old, all of them are still here.